The Acolyte has been cancelled. There will be no more Qimir. There will be no more Osha. There will be no more PLAGUEIS. But why? What is the real reason that the Acolyte will not be getting a second season? Is it because the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is at an all-time low for a Star Wars project at 18%? Or is it just simply that the show wasn't good enough for a second season? Or was it the crazy divide in the Star Wars fandom that cancelled this show? Well, it's really not that simple, because now reports are coming out just a few days after the announcement that the Acolyte will not be getting a second season, and these reports are saying that the showrunner, Leslie Headland, has been developing a second season for this Acolyte show since February of this year. And it definitely wasn't her decision to cancel this show, and I'm sure it was quite the surprise.
A surprise, to be sure.
So let's get into what really happened. Why is the Acolyte not getting a season 2? Well, first we have to talk about the infamous review bombing of 2024. Before the first episode of the Acolyte was even released on June 4th, the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes was a 13%. So before any Star Wars fans saw a single second of this Acolyte show, it was review bombed and had a 13%. Already, audiences not even giving this show a chance. But there is a bigger reason for this 13% on Rotten Tomatoes before the show was even released. And that leads us to the Star Wars fandom. Currently, the Star Wars fandom has never been more divided. It seems as though every day now, the divide gets even bigger and bigger. And this is not something new. It seems like this divide only began back in 2017 when The Last Jedi was released, but that's not true. Star Wars fans have been arguing for a lot longer than just 7 years. The prequel trilogy had a clear divide in the Star Wars fandom, but even if you go back all the way to 1980, when Empire Strikes Back, the sequel to the original Star Wars, was released, the divide in the Star Wars fandom had already begun. However, there are some big steps along the way that made this divide a lot worse. The first one being the prequel trilogy, as they are very different from the original trilogy, and like I mentioned before, The Last Jedi was clearly a huge divide in the Star Wars fandom, but it seems like this divide has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and is reaching the peak of the mountaintop at this Acolyte show. It's almost the perfect storm for the Star Wars fandom, and it seems like there's no turning back now. You look back at every project over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, from Andor being called Andbor and just having bricks and screws in Star Wars, to the Book of Boba Fett being considered Beta Fett and just Mando Season 2.5, to even The Mandalorian Season 2, which might be the single greatest season of any television show ever. Fans still complained that they had to rely on cameos to make a show good. And you might be sitting here saying,
Mike, clearly those people aren't even Star Wars fans. They're just hating to hate.
Now you may be right, but now there's something called social media, and these people have the opportunity to go online and trash all these Star Wars shows. And this is not going to stop. Skeleton Crew releases on December 3rd. It is the next Star Wars live-action show, and even though we are over 3 months away from that show being released, I can guarantee you that that show will continue the divide in the Star Wars fandom. So is the real reason the Acolyte show got cancelled because of the divide in the Star Wars fandom?
Possibly.
There must be more to it, right? What this brings us to is the Acolyte show just not good enough for a second season. This is just a completely opinionated portion of this video, and everybody is going to have a different opinion when it comes to this first season of the Acolyte show, but personally, I liked it quite a bit. From the storytelling, which gives us a brand new cast of characters in a brand new time period in Star Wars, and each individual character goes on their own arc, and I could argue each one is better than the last. Osha starting off as a former Jedi who seems to be the good twin, eventually finding out that her whole entire life has been a lie, turning to the dark side, force choking her former master to death, and becoming an acolyte of the Sith. To her evil twin, May, going from being the bad guy at the beginning of the series, murdering Jedi for revenge, thinking her twin sister has been dead for 16 years, only to find out that she's not dead, leading her back to the light side to be with her sister again, and making the ultimate sacrifice for that sister at the end of the series to wipe her mind to save her sister's life. Now, don't even get me started on Qimir. Let's talk about the acting in this show. We won't even mention that Li Jiang Cha learned English for the role of Master Soul. Oh wait, I just mentioned it. Amanda Steinberg is playing both May and Osha, and there's never once in this entire series that you mix up the two characters. An incredible performance from Amanda, and Manny Jacinto pulls out the performance of a lifetime as Qimir. And not to mention, this show has some of the best lightsaber duels we've ever seen in Star Wars. Choreography is incredible, as it's the same guy who choreographed the hallway scene for Vader in Rogue One, and these fights are on par with the prequel trilogy lightsaber duels. So whether or not this first season of The Acolyte is good or not is completely up to you and your own opinion. I'm not here to convince you whether this show is good or not, but there is no denying that this first season of The Acolyte set up more story to be told. The finale ends with Venestra Rowe having the realization that Qimir is still alive. Fans believing that Qimir was once the former apprentice to Venestra, and they had some sort of falling out which left Qimir with this big scar on his back, most likely from the light whip that Venestra Rowe wields. The finale also introduced for the first time ever in live action Darth Plagueis, and a possibility of seeing more of that character in a second season really excited a lot of fans. There was plenty of story for a second season, and like I said at the top of this video, new reports are being released that Leslie Headland was working on a second season for this Acolyte series for the last 6 months. So what happened? Why is this show being canceled? Now you might be saying,
Mike, the viewership numbers, they were just released a few weeks ago and they did not look good.
Well, yes and no. The Acolyte's premiere actually was the biggest premiere on Disney Plus of 2024, bringing in 4.8 million views. Those are almost the same numbers as Ahsoka's premiere. And Ahsoka has had a long history in the Star Wars galaxy, from 7 seasons of the Clone Wars to Tales of the Jedi to Star Wars Rebels to appearing in live action in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett, but the Acolyte premiere was around the same numbers as Ahsoka. But over the course of the 8-episode series, the views fell off, with a little peak towards episode 5 because of the incredible lightsaber duels in that episode, to another peak in episode 8, which was the finale, but that peak wasn't nearly big enough, as the Acolyte finale was the lowest viewed finale of any Star Wars live action Disney Plus series. So even though it came out to a strong start, the division in the Star Wars fandom led to a huge fall off in viewer numbers by the final episode. Now with that being said, you have to look at the other Star Wars shows that have been greenlit for a second season. Ahsoka and Andor. Ahsoka's views, unlike The Acolyte, stayed very high, as Clone Wars and Rebels fans alike all enjoyed the Ahsoka show quite a bit. But when you look at Andor, things are a little bit different. Andor was pretty steady when it came to viewer numbers. Sadly, that steady number was extremely low. However, because it did not drop off towards the end, the viewership numbers by the finale were still higher than the Acolyte show. But the premiere of Andor was way lower than the Acolytes. And yet, Andor still got a second season. Even with the division in the Star Wars fandom, with fans calling it Andbor, complaining about bricks and screws being in Star Wars, it still was greenlit for a second season. So why was the Acolyte not given a second season? What is the real reason? Honestly, it's a combination of all of these things. It's the perfect storm. Usually, Lucasfilm would not even consider saying the word canceled. Look at the Book of Boba Fett or the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. The Book of Boba Fett and Kenobi could get a second season. It's never been said that either of these shows will get a second season, but it's also never been said that these two shows have been canceled. So why is the Acolyte not pulling a Book of Boba Fett or a Kenobi and just going away? Maybe there's a possibility that it could get a second season, but there haven't been any announcements for a second season. Why are they using the word canceled? Now here I see two options. One is more of the optimistic side of me that says this is Lucasfilm just testing the waters, seeing how fans would react to the news that the Acolyte has been canceled, as it's been a few days now since this news was released and Lucasfilm hasn't said anything publicly. They haven't confirmed this cancellation or denied it either way. So maybe, just maybe, they are testing the waters to see how fans react to this news. And for fans holding out hope, there could be an announcement at Star Wars Celebration next year in April that the Acolyte will be getting a second season, and they'll be like, I don't know what you were talking about last year in August. But the more likely scenario here is they are trying to please the fans. And when you look online, it seems like the people who are yelling louder than everybody else are the people who hated the Acolyte. So the real reason the Acolyte was canceled and will not be getting a second season is not because it's currently sitting at an 18% as an audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's definitely not because the first season was not good. And it's not because of the viewership numbers. It's a combination of all of those things to create the perfect storm that Disney could not deny. And even with a lot of fans wanting a second season, with hashtag Renew the Acolyte trending all the time, it still wasn't enough. So with that, I say the fight is done. We lost.
The fight is done. We lost.
Maybe someday we could see the characters of Qimir, Osha, May, Venestra, Darth Plagueis again in Star Wars. But right now, it doesn't seem like that will be coming anytime soon. But tell me what you think in the comment section below. Are you happy that The Acolyte is not getting a second season, or are you bummed out just like me? Tell me in the comments below. And in more bad news, Tamara Morrison just spoke out about Boba Fett not being in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and how Boba Fett has been put on a shelf, and we might not be seeing the infamous bounty hunter for quite some time. But if you want to know more about that, I explain all of it in this video right here.